The night the offer was made, Ariana Cole already felt something was wrong. It wasn't obvious, nothing ever was with Ethan Blackwood. To the outside world, Ethan was perfect, wealthy, charming, composed, the kind of man who never raised his voice, never lost control, the kind of man people trusted instantly. But Ariana had learned something after 2 years of marriage. Perfection hides things. And that night, as she stood in the quiet hallway of the private hospital, staring through the glass at Ethan's mother hooked to machines, she felt it, a cold, creeping unease. Ethan turned to her slowly. Then something unexpected. He dropped to his knees, right there on the cold marble floor. "Ariana," his voice cracked, perfectly timed. "You're the only one who can save her." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" He reached for her hands, gripping them tightly, almost too tightly. "I had you tested," he said, "months ago, just in case." Ariana blinked. "You what?" "You're a perfect match," he whispered. 1 in 1,000. The words echoed in her head. Perfect match. 1 in 1,000. Her eyes drifted back to the glass window. Inside, Margaret Blackwood lay motionless, pale, fragile, surrounded by expensive machines that beeped rhythmically. Kidney failure, 3 times a week on dialysis. Dying. "I can't donate," Ariana said quietly, her voice trembling. "I mean, I don't even understand how this—" "You can," Ethan cut in gently, too gently. "And you should." That word hit differently. Should. Not could, not maybe. Should. Ariana slowly pulled her hands away. "What about you?" she asked. "You're her son." For just a second, just one, Ethan's expression flickered. Then it was gone. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded medical report. "I tried," he said, handing it to her. "I'm not compatible." The paper was covered in medical terms she didn't fully understand. Stamps, signatures, official looking. It looked real. It felt real. And Ariana wanted it to be real. Because the alternative was unthinkable. "I would give anything for her," Ethan whispered. "You know that." Ariana swallowed hard. She believed him. She needed to believe him. 3 days, that's how long it took. 3 days of soft words, late-night whispers, gentle touches. 3 days of Ethan becoming everything she ever needed. "You'll truly belong to this family," he murmured one night, his fingers brushing through her hair. "Not just my wife, but blood. My mother will love you, I promise." Belong. That word had always been Ariana's weakness, because she never had anywhere to belong. Not since she was 9. The memory came back like it always did. Rain, screaming tires, a crushing impact, a highway in Georgia lit by flashing lights. She remembered her mother's hand slipping from hers, her father's voice suddenly gone. After that, nothing, just a system that never cared. Foster homes, cold beds, strangers who never remembered her name. Ariana learned early, if you want love, you earn it, you prove it, you sacrifice for it. "Okay," she whispered on the 3rd night. Ethan stilled. "I'll do it." Silence. Then suddenly his arms wrapped around her tightly, too tightly. "You're incredible," he breathed. "You have no idea what this means." Ariana closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt needed. The next day, the paperwork began. Stacks of documents, consent forms, medical waivers, legal clauses, each one more complicated than the last. Ariana's head spun as she signed, page after page, signature after signature. Then Ethan pointed to one specific line. "One more," he said casually, "just standard procedure." She frowned slightly. "What is it?" "Backup protocol," he replied smoothly, "in case something changes during surgery." She skimmed it. Something about if the primary recipients couldn't proceed, the organ could be reassigned. Ariana hesitated, just for a second. Is that normal? "Every hospital does it," he said without missing a beat. His tone was calm, confident, certain. And Ariana signed. The morning of the surgery came too fast. The hospital lights blurred above her as she was wheeled down the hallway. Her heart pounded. Her palms were cold. Fear crept in, but it was too late now. Ethan walked beside her, holding her hand. "I'll be right there when you wake up," he promised. His voice was soft, warm, perfect. "I'll hold you to that." He leaned down, kissing her forehead. "And after this," he whispered, "we're going to Bora Bora, just you and me." The doors to the operating room opened. Bright white light flooded her vision. As she was rolled inside, Ariana looked back one last time at the man she loved, the man she trusted, the man she believed would never hurt her. The doors closed between them, and she never saw the expression on his face. Because if she had, she would never have said yes. Pain. That was the first thing Ariana Cole felt when she opened her eyes. Not a dull ache, not something distant. Real pain. Sharp, heavy, crawling through her body like something alive. Her breath hitched as she tried to move, but the moment she did, a burning sensation tore through her side, forcing a weak gasp from her lips. Something wasn't right. This wasn't what she imagined. Her eyes slowly adjusted to the light above her. And then, confusion. The ceiling wasn't white and spotless like the private surgical wing she had been promised. It was dull, gray, cracked in places. Her gaze shifted slightly. 4 beds. Not 1, 4. Separated by thin curtains that barely offered privacy. Somewhere to her left, someone coughed violently. To her right, a television played loudly. Some cheap game show with forced laughter echoing through the room. Ariana blinked slowly. No, this wasn't right. This wasn't supposed to be her recovery room. Where was Ethan? He promised. He said, "My face will be the first thing you see." Her lips parted, dry and trembling. Ethan? The name barely escaped her throat. No answer. Only the distant hum of machines. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time blurred into something shapeless. Nurses came and went, but none of them stayed long enough to answer her questions properly. "Rest," they said. "You just had major surgery. Don't stress yourself." But Ariana wasn't stupid. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. By the 4th day, the fear had fully settled in. Heavy, cold, unavoidable. And then, the door opened. Ariana's heart jumped. For a brief, foolish second, hope rushed in. Ethan, he was finally here. And for a moment, everything inside her softened. But then, she saw who was with him, and the world shifted. Ethan Blackwood stepped into the room first. Perfect, as always. Tailored navy suit, clean, calm, untouched by anything that had happened. No worry, no relief, no emotion. Behind him, a nurse pushed a wheelchair, and in it sat Margaret Blackwood. Alive, wrapped in a luxurious shawl, her posture straight, her expression sharp. Too sharp. Too strong for someone who was supposed to be dying. And then a third figure entered. A woman. Tall, elegant, stunning. Her dress was deep red. The kind of red that didn't whisper. It demanded attention. It flowed around her like liquid, like something dangerous. Her hand rested comfortably on Ethan's arm. Not hesitantly, not politely, possessively. Like she belonged there. Like Ariana didn't. Ariana's breath caught. Her heart began to pound violently against her ribs. "Ethan?" she whispered, but he didn't answer her. Instead, he walked forward calmly, reached into his pocket, and tossed something onto her chest. A brown envelope. It landed with a soft, heavy thud. Cold. Unfeeling. Just like his eyes. "This is for you," he said. His tone, flat, distant. Like he was handing over a receipt, not speaking to his wife. Ariana's hands trembled as she slowly picked it up. Something inside her already knew, but her mind refused to accept it. "No," she whispered weakly. "No? What is this?" She opened it. Paper slid out. Official. Stamped. Final. Her vision blurred as the words hit her. Petition for divorce. Filed. 3 days ago. The day of her surgery. Her fingers tightened around the paper. Her breathing turned uneven. I don't understand. Her voice cracked. I did everything you asked. Everything. Her eyes lifted to Ethan, searching, begging. But he wasn't there anymore. Not the man she loved. Not the man she believed in. Just a stranger. Then Margaret laughed. A cold, bitter sound. You did, she said, her lips curling into a cruel smile. And for that, we're grateful. Her stomach dropped. We? Did you really think, she continued slowly, that my son married you for love? Each word felt like a blade. An orphan? No family, no money, no one to ask questions if you disappeared? The room spun. The monitor beside Ariana began to beep faster, louder, but no one moved. No one cared. You were convenient, Margaret said simply. A perfect match with no consequences. The truth crashed down all at once. Heavy, brutal, unavoidable. The woman in red stepped forward. Her heels clicked softly across the floor. Sharp, precise, final. My name is Victoria Hale, she said, her voice smooth as silk. Ethan and I have been together for years. Years. Ariana's heart stopped. While I was building my career in London, he found a temporary solution. Her hands scanned Ariana slowly, judging, dismissing, cold. You. Her hand moved to her stomach, a subtle gesture, but devastating. I'm carrying his child, she added. The words landed like thunder. The real future of this family. Ariana couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Everything she believed in shattered. Ethan finally spoke again. Calm, controlled, emotionless. This was planned. Just like that. No apology, no hesitation. From the beginning. Ariana stared at him, at the man she gave everything to. Her trust, her love, her body, and now, a part of her life. You used me, she whispered. Not a question, a realization. Ethan didn't deny it, didn't even flinch. Instead, he reached into his pocket again, pulled out a small stack of cash, and dropped it beside her bed. $2,000, he said. Enough for you to start over. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Sophisticating. Ariana looked at the money, then at him. Something inside her broke. Completely. I'll go to the police, she said suddenly, her voice shaking but louder now. Stronger. You forced me. This isn't legal. I'll tell them everything. Ethan smiled. Finally. And that smile was colder than anything she had ever seen. No, Ariana, he said quietly. You won't. The moment she said yes, everything changed. Not outside, not yet, but inside her, something quietly broke. Her name was Elena Carter now, a woman who had spent her entire life begging for a place to belong. And in that fragile moment, standing under the cold hospital lights, she believed she had finally earned it. A family, a home, a reason to exist. What she didn't realize was that she had just signed herself into a carefully designed trap. The next 72 hours passed like a dream she couldn't wake up from. Adrian never left her side. He became softer, warmer, almost perfect. He brought her coffee before she even asked, sat beside her whispering promises into her hair, held her hand longer than usual, tighter than usual, like he was afraid she might slip away. But it wasn't fear. It was control. "You're saving her life," Adrian murmured one night, his voice low and hypnotic. "After this, everything will be different. My mother will finally see you as her daughter." Daughter. That word hit Elena harder than anything else. She had never been called that, not since she was 9. And just like that, her fear disappeared, replaced by hope. Dangerous, blinding hope. The day before surgery, Elena sat in a quiet office surrounded by stacks of documents, page after page, sign here, initial there, legal terms she barely understood. Her head throbbed from exhaustion, her eyes burned, but Adrian stood beside her, guiding her hand like everything was normal. "Just standard hospital procedure," he said casually, pointing at another paragraph. "Nothing to worry about." Her fingers trembled as she signed, again and again and again. Then one clause caught her eye, something about organ reassignment. If the recipient becomes medically unfit, the hospital reserves the right to transfer the organ to another patient. Elena frowned slightly. "What does this mean?" she asked weakly. Adrian didn't hesitate. "It's just legal backup," he said smoothly. "Every hospital has it. It'll never happen." Never. That word echoed in her mind, and for some reason, it didn't comfort her. But she was too tired to question it, too emotionally drained to think clearly. So she signed. That was her biggest mistake. The next morning, everything moved fast, too fast. The hospital lights blurred above her as they wheeled her down the hallway. Machines beeped, voices echoed, cold air brushed against her skin. Elena clutched Adrian's hand tightly, like it was the only real thing left in the world. "You'll be there when I wake up, right?" she whispered. Adrian leaned down, kissing her forehead. "Of course," he said softly. "First thing you'll see is me." She smiled weakly and believed him. The operating room doors opened. Bright white light swallowed her whole. The smell of antiseptic filled her lungs. Doctors moved around her like shadows. Someone adjusted her IV. "Count backwards from 10, a voice said gently. 10, 9, 8. Her grip on reality began slipping. 7, 6. She tried to hold on to Adrian's face, his voice, his promise. 5, 4. But it was fading. 3, 2. And then darkness. Silence. When Elena opened her eyes, the world felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. The ceiling above her was cracked, gray, ugly. Not the private room Adrian had promised, not the luxury, not the care, just a crowded hospital ward. Voices echoed around her, someone coughing, a TV playing loudly in the background. Pain exploded through her side like fire. She gasped, her body refusing to move. Her hand instinctively reached down and froze. There was a tube coming out of her body, a thick bandage wrapped tightly around her waist. Reality hit her at once. The surgery was done. Her kidney was gone. But Adrian wasn't there. Her heart began to race. Where was he? He promised. He swore. He said. The door creaked open. Elena's breath caught. Hope flickered in her chest. Maybe he was late. Maybe. Footsteps echoed inside. Slow, calm, deliberate. And then she saw him, Adrian, standing at the door, perfect as ever, cold as ever. But he wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him, tall, elegant, dressed in deep red, the kind of red that looked like fresh blood. Her hand rested comfortably on Adrian's arm, like it belonged there, like it always had. And behind them, a wheelchair rolled in, carrying Adrian's mother, alive, watching. smiling. Elena's world shattered silently. Without saying a word, Adrian walked forward, pulled out a brown envelope, and dropped it on her chest. "This is for you," he said flatly. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Her vision blurred. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. And then she saw the words, "Divorce papers, filed, signed." 3 days ago, the same day she was on the operating table. Elena's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her entire existence collapsed in that moment. And Adrian, he just stood there, watching her break, as if that had been the plan all along. For a moment, Elena didn't breathe. The word divorce blurred in front of her eyes, the ink on the paper seeming to bleed into the thin hospital sheet beneath her fingers. Her lips trembled. I don't understand," she whispered. Her voice was weak, broken, almost unrecognizable. "I did everything you asked." Adrian didn't react, not even a flicker of guilt, not even a second of hesitation. He simply adjusted his cufflinks like this was just another business transaction. Cold, calculated, finished. Before he could respond, the woman in red stepped forward. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor. Slow, confident, deliberate. Every step felt like a nail being driven into Elena's chest. "My name is Vanessa Hale," she said smoothly, her lips curling into a faint smile. "You've been very useful." Useful? Not brave, not kind, not family, just useful. Elena's heart dropped. Her gaze slowly shifted from Vanessa to Adrian, looking for denial, for something human, for anything. But all she found was silence. "We've been together for years," Vanessa continued, almost casually, "long before you came into the picture." Elena's fingers tightened around the paper. Her pulse pounded louder. No, that wasn't possible. "This marriage?" Vanessa tilted her head slightly. "It was just a solution." "A solution? To what?" Elena managed to ask, her voice barely holding together. This time, Adrian answered, flat, emotionless. "To my mother's condition." The room went silent. Even the background noise faded away, like the entire world was holding its breath. "You were a perfect match," Adrian continued, "rare, convenient." Each word hit harder than the last. "And most importantly," he added, his gaze finally locking onto hers, "you had no one." That was it. That was the reason. Not love, not fate, not chance. She was chosen because no one would come looking for her. Elena felt something inside her completely collapse. Not loudly, not emotionally, just completely. Like a building finally giving up after years of cracks. "You planned this?" she whispered. Vanessa smiled. Every detail. Her hand slowly moved to her stomach. A subtle gesture, but devastating. "I'm pregnant," she said softly. The words echoed in Elena's ears like a gunshot. The real heir. Elena's vision blurred. Her breathing became uneven. Everything started spinning. "We couldn't risk anything going wrong," Vanessa continued. "We needed certainty, control. And you," Adrian added, his gaze finally locking onto hers, "were the safest option." Safe, disposable, replaceable. Elena's hand slowly moved to her side, to the bandage, to the place where a part of her was missing, gone, given, stolen. "You took everything from me," she whispered. Her voice cracked, but her eyes didn't leave theirs. "And for what?" Adrian sighed, almost impatient. "As compensation," he reached into his pocket, pulled out a thick stack of cash and dropped it beside her bed. $10,000. Silence. For a second, Elena just stared at the money, then back at him, then back at the money again. 10,000. For her kidney? For 2 years of lies? For destroying her entire life? Something inside her snapped. Not loudly, not emotionally, but completely. "I'm going to the police," she said. Her voice was no longer weak, no longer shaking. It was calm. Too calm. Adrian actually smiled. A small, dangerous smile. "On what grounds?" Elena froze. "You signed everything," he continued. "Every document, every consent form." His voice was smooth now, almost mocking. Voluntarily. That word hit her harder than anything else. "No pressure, no force, no coercion," he added. "That's what the court will see." Vanessa chuckled softly. "And who will support your story? Your family?" Silence. Elena didn't answer, because they already knew the truth. She had no one. Adrian turned toward the door. "This conversation is over." Vanessa followed, her heels clicking again, echoing like a countdown. Adrian's mother gave Elena one last look, filled with pure disgust. "Trash," she muttered. And just like that, they started walking away. Elena lay there, motionless, empty, broken, alone. Everything was gone. Everything she believed in, everything she sacrificed for, gone. Adrian's hand touched the door handle. He was about to leave, for good. But then, the door swung open. A man stepped inside. Tall, sharp, dressed in a white coat. His presence alone shifted the entire atmosphere of the room. "What is going on here?" His voice cut through the silence like a blade. Everyone froze. The doctor's eyes moved quickly, scanning the room, the machines, Elena's condition, the people at the door. And then his expression darkened. "She's 4 days post-op," he said, his tone now dangerously controlled. "Who authorized this level of stress on a critical patient?" Adrian straightened slightly, trying to regain control. "This is a private family matter." It stopped being private the moment it became medical. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. The doctor stepped closer. His gaze locked onto Adrian. Sharp. Unforgiving. "I assume you're the husband," he said. Adrian nodded stiffly. The doctor paused, then spoke words that changed everything. "There's something you should know." A beat. "Your mother's transplant." He let the silence stretch, just enough to build tension, just enough to make them feel it. "Was canceled." The room exploded into shock. "What?" Adrian snapped. "That's impossible," his mother shouted from the wheelchair. But the doctor didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't hesitate. And Elena, for the first time since waking up, felt something new rise inside her. Not pain, not fear, hope. Because whatever was about to come next, they clearly didn't see it coming. The word canceled still echoed in the room, like a crack in reality no one could repair. Adrian took a step forward, his composure finally slipping. "What do you mean, canceled?" he snapped. "The surgery was scheduled. The donor," he gestured sharply toward Elena, "everything was already done." The doctor didn't react, didn't raise his voice, but his presence alone silenced the chaos. "Minutes before the procedure," he said calmly, "your mother's final tests revealed severe complications." He glanced briefly at the woman in the wheelchair. "Cardiac instability, hidden infection." Elena's mother stiffened. "That's not true." "If we had continued," the doctor cut in coldly, "she would have died on the operating table." Silence. Heavy. Crushing. Vanessa's hand slowly slipped from Adrian's arm. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. Adrian shook his head, trying to process it. No, that's not possible. But the doctor wasn't finished. The surgical board made the final decision. The transplant was aborted immediately. Elena lay still, her breathing shallow, her mind racing. Aborted? Her eyes widened slightly. If it was canceled, she whispered, her voice barely audible, then where did my kidney go? The question hung in the air, sharp, dangerous, unavoidable. Adrian turned quickly toward the doctor. Yes, he demanded, where is it? This time, the doctor's expression changed. Not anger, not frustration, something closer to satisfaction. A harvested organ, he said slowly, can only survive outside the body for a few hours. He crossed his arms, and when the intended recipient becomes unfit, he paused, letting the tension build. The organ is reassigned. Adrian's face went pale. Reassigned? Vanessa repeated quietly. To another patient, the doctor confirmed. No, Adrian stepped forward. That wasn't part of the agreement. It was, the doctor interrupted sharply. His eyes locked onto Adrian's. Your wife signed the authorization herself. Everything stopped. Elena's heart skipped. The clause, the paper, the moment she hesitated and still signed. That wasn't a backup. That was a door. And now it had opened. You had no right. Adrian's voice rose, panic creeping in. We paid for that procedure. The doctor's expression hardened instantly. A human organ, he said, his voice cutting like steel, is not property. Silence. It is not something you can store or claim or control. Adrian's confidence shattered completely. Then who got it? He demanded. The room held its breath. Elena's fingers curled slightly against the bed. Her entire body felt frozen, because somehow she knew this moment mattered. The doctor turned, looked directly at her, and for the first time, his voice softened. The recipient, he said gently, personally requested that you be told. A pause. He wants to thank you. His name is... The silence stretched. Long, heavy, unbearable. Victor Langford. The name hit the room like thunder. Adrian staggered back. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. Even his mother went still, because everyone knew that name. Victor Langford, a billionaire, a titan of industry, a man who owned half the city's skyline, a ghost in recent months, vanished from public life due to a mysterious illness, and now the truth stood right in front of them. Elena's kidney didn't go to the woman who destroyed her life. It saved one of the most powerful men in the country. Adrian's lips moved, but no words came out. His entire world had just flipped upside down, because suddenly, Elena wasn't worthless anymore. She was valuable, dangerously valuable. The Langford Foundation, the doctor continued, has already taken over all medical expenses. He looked at Elena. You'll be transferred to a private executive suite within the hour. Elena blinked slowly, trying to understand, trying to feel something, but everything still felt unreal. He also expressed, the doctor added, a strong desire to meet you personally once you recover. Adrian stepped forward suddenly, desperate now, panicked. Elena, his voice changed completely, soft, pleading. Listen to me. We don't need to do this. Forget those papers. It was just... She pulled her hand away, fast, sharp. The pain in her side flared violently, but she didn't react because something inside her had changed completely. She looked at him, not with love, not with pain, but with something far colder. I don't know you, she said quietly. Adrian froze. Then she turned to the doctor, her voice steady, controlled. unrecognizable. Call security. There are strangers in my room. Silence exploded. Within minutes, everything fell apart. Adrian was dragged out, shouting, his mother screaming, Vanessa Keels no longer confident, now frantic, and Elena lay there in silence, alone again, but not broken. Because this time, she wasn't the victim anymore. She was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Silence filled the room again, but this time it felt different. Not empty, not suffocating, controlled. Elena lay still on the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, but her mind was no longer broken. It was rebuilding, piece by piece, stronger, colder, sharper. Within an hour, everything changed. Just like the doctor said, she was no longer in that crowded gray ward. No more noise, no more strangers. Now she was somewhere else entirely. A private executive suite, top floor, floor-to-ceiling glass windows stretching across the wall. The city glittered below like a living ocean of light. Soft leather furniture, quiet, controlled temperature, controlled environment. Power. The door opened quietly. A man stepped inside. Mid-40s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. The kind of man who noticed everything and missed nothing. "Elena Carter," he said calmly. "My name is Marcus Hale, Chief of Staff for Mr. Langford." Elena slowly turned her head, studied him, measured him. "For what reason?" she asked quietly. Marcus didn't hesitate. "You saved his life." Simple, direct, true. Elena looked away, back toward the city. The lights blurred slightly in her vision. "I didn't do it for him," she said. "I know," Marcus replied. A pause. "But he still owes you." Those words lingered, heavy, important. "For Mr. Langford," Marcus continued, "a debt is never ignored." Elena's fingers tightened slightly against the blanket. Debt. That word meant something now, something real. "All your medical expenses are covered," Marcus added. "Your recovery, therapy, future care, everything." Elena let out a slow breath. "Why?" she asked. Marcus stepped closer. "Because people like him," he said, "don't believe in luck." A pause. "They believe in value." Elena's eyes shifted slightly. "And what am I worth?" she asked. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He studied her. Not her weakness, not her condition, her eyes. "You're about to find out," he said. And then he placed a folder on the table beside her bed. "Rest," he added. "You'll need your strength." The door closed behind him. Silence returned. But this time, it wasn't lonely. It was waiting. Days passed. Recovery was slow, painful, unforgiving. Every movement reminded her of what she had lost. Every breath carried the weight of betrayal. But she didn't break. She adapted. Morning meant physical therapy. Afternoon meant silence. Night meant thinking. And Elena thought about everything. Adrian, Vanessa, the lies, the manipulation, the moment she signed that paper, her biggest mistake, or maybe her turning point. Because without that signature, she would still be trapped, still blind, still weak. A week later, the door opened again, but this time, Marcus wasn't alone. A wheelchair rolled slowly into the room, and in it sat a man who carried power without needing to prove it. Silver hair, sharp eyes, a presence that filled the entire room without effort. Victor Langford, the man whose life now beats because of her. Elena slowly sat up straighter, ignoring the pain, ignoring the weakness, because something told her this moment mattered. Victor studied her in silence, long, carefully. "So," he finally said, his voice calm, deep, measured. "You're the one." Elena didn't hesitate immediately. She met his gaze directly. No fear, no hesitation. "Yes," she said. A faint smile touched his lips. "Interesting," he murmured. A pause. "Most people in your position would be crying, asking for sympathy." His eyes narrowed slightly. "But you're not." Elena's voice was steady. I already cried. Another pause. Victor leaned back slightly in his chair. Good, he said, because tears don't build power. Silence settled between them. Then Victor spoke again. I know everything. Elena's heart skipped. Your past, the foster system, the marriage, the betrayal. He didn't look away. You gave everything to people who saw you as nothing. The words hit deep, but Elena didn't flinch. Not anymore. Victor nodded slightly. That's why you survived, he said. A pause. Most wouldn't. Then he leaned forward. And that's exactly why I'm here. Elena's breath slowed, focused. Your husband made one critical mistake, Victor continued. He underestimated you. The room felt heavier. People like him, Victor said quietly, only understand power. A pause. So, I'm offering you something. Elena's eyes locked onto his. A choice. The air shifted. Walk away from all of this, Victor said. Take the money, start over, live a quiet life. Or, he leaned closer, his voice dropping slightly. Step into my world. Elena's heart pounded. A world where people don't use you. A pause. They fear you. Silence. Heavy. Electric. Why me? Elena asked. Victor smiled faintly. Because, he said, you've already survived the worst thing a person can experience. A beat. Being powerless. Elena's fingers slowly curled into the sheets. Her past, her pain, her scars, everything led to this moment. Victor extended his hand. Learn from me, he said. The room held its breath. Or go back to a world that already proved, he paused, it will destroy you again. Elena looked at his hand. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. Her grip was firm, unshaken. Teach me, she said. Victor's smile deepened slightly, and in that moment, Elena Carter disappeared, and something far more dangerous. The transformation didn't begin with revenge. It began with discipline. At exactly 5 a.m., the lights in Elena's suite turned on automatically. No alarms, no second chances. Up. Marcus's voice came through the intercom. Cold, precise. Elena's body screamed in protest. Her sides still ached, her muscles burned from the previous day. But she didn't hesitate, because this wasn't about comfort anymore. It was about becoming someone no one could ever use again. The first week nearly broke her. Physical therapy pushed her limits. Every step felt like fire tearing through her side. Every movement reminded her of what she had lost. Pain is information, Marcus told her once, watching her struggle, not weakness. So she learned to listen, not to fear it. By the second week, she stopped reacting to pain. By the third, she controlled it. But the real transformation didn't happen in her body. It happened in her mind. Every morning at 7 a.m., she sat across from Victor, a table between them, the city stretching endlessly behind him. A newspaper lay open. Why did the market drop yesterday? Victor asked without looking up. Elena hesitated, then answered. Investor panic, a tech firm reported losses. Wrong. Victor cut in immediately. Silence. It dropped, he said calmly, because people believed it would drop. He finally looked at her. Fear moves markets, not facts. Elena leaned back slightly, processing, adapting, learning. Again, Victor said, and just like that, she started over. Her days became a system, a machine. 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., private lessons, corporate law, finance, negotiation. Contracts stopped looking confusing. They became weapons. She learned how a single clause could destroy a company, how silence in a negotiation could force someone to reveal everything, how patience was more dangerous than aggression. 4 p.m. to 7 p.m., real-world exposure. Victor didn't protect her. He tested her. She sat in high-level meetings, watched CEOs lie, watched investors manipulate, watched power shift without a single raised voice. At first, she stayed quiet, observing, absorbing. Then one day, Victor turned to her mid-meeting. "Your opinion," he said. The room froze. Executives turned toward her, judging, measuring, waiting. Old Elena would have panicked, looked down, stayed silent. But she was gone. "The offer is weak," Elena said calmly. A pause. "Why?" one of the men challenged. Elena met his gaze, unshaken. "Because you're negotiating from fear, not leverage." Silence dropped like a blade. Victor smiled slightly. The deal closed 10 minutes later, on Elena's terms. Weeks turned into months, and slowly the outside began to match the inside. Her appearance changed, not dramatically, but deliberately. Her hair, sharp, precise. Her posture, controlled, confident. Her clothes, tailored, powerful. But the real change was in her eyes. No more softness, no more hesitation, only calculation, only awareness, only control. One evening, Marcus entered her office, placed a file on her desk. "You'll want to see this," he said. Elena didn't rush, didn't react. She simply opened it. Inside, photos, documents, financial reports, and one name, Adrian Cross. Her hand paused for a half-second, then continued. "Status?" she asked. Marcus leaned against the desk. "He's collapsing," he said simply. Elena flipped through the pages. Assets being sold, luxury cars gone, properties liquidated. "Medical expenses?" she asked. "Out of control," Marcus replied. "His mother's treatment is draining everything." Elena's expression didn't change. "Business?" Marcus smirked slightly. "Desperate." "Perfect." Elena closed the file slowly. The room felt colder now, sharper. Months ago, that name would have shattered her. Now, though, it meant opportunity. "Good," she said quietly. Marcus studied her. "You're not angry?" he asked. Elena looked up. "I was," she said. A pause. "But anger is loud." Her fingers tapped lightly on the file. "And loud people make mistakes." Silence. Marcus nodded slowly. "So what's the plan?" Elena leaned back in her chair. The city lights reflected in her eyes. Cold. Endless. "We don't destroy him," she said. A pause. "Not yet." Marcus raised his eyebrow. "Then what?" Elena's lips curved slightly. Not a smile. Something sharper. "We help him." Silence. Confusion. Then realization. "A trap," Marcus murmured. Elena closed the file. "A lifeline," she corrected. "A beat. One he'll never realize is actually a noose." The game had officially begun, and this time, Elena wasn't the victim. She was the one setting the rules. By the 6th month, Adrian Cross was no longer the man Elena once thought she loved. The expensive watches were gone. The imported cars had disappeared one by one. The mansion that once echoed with false elegance now felt hollow. Debt had a sound, and it was loud. Medical bills stacked higher every week. His mother's dialysis, her cardiac treatment, emergency specialists, private nurses. Every invoice was another crack in the empire he had built on lies. And Elena watched it all from above. Not with joy, not with pity, with precision. Marcus entered her office just after sunset, a folder in hand. "He's looking for investors," Marcus said. Elena didn't look surprised. She expected this. "He's already been rejected by 3 firms," Marcus continued. "His reputation is weakening." Elena slowly stood from her chair and walked toward the glass wall. The city lights stretched beneath her like a map of possibilities. "Then it's time," she said. Marcus already knew what she meant. Within 48 hours, a new company appeared, Phoenix Capital Group, a shell corporation, perfectly legal, perfectly invisible. No direct connection to Victor, no trace leading back to Elena. Only opportunity, wrapped in elegance. An invitation was delivered to Adrian's office 3 days later. Heavy black envelope, gold-embossed lettering. A private gala, potential strategic investors, selective attendance only. To Adrian, it looked like salvation. To Elena, it was the first knot in the rope. The gala took place on the top floor of the Langford Grand Hotel. Crystal chandeliers, live piano, a skyline view glowing beneath the night sky. Adrian arrived early, nervous, trying hard not to show it. He adjusted his tie, scanned the room, looked for the representatives of Phoenix Capital. Then the lights dimmed. Victor stepped onto the stage. His presence instantly silenced the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the microphone, his voice calm and commanding. "Tonight, I'd like to introduce the newest strategic force behind Phoenix Capital." A pause. Every eye in the room turned toward the staircase. Elena Carter. Silence exploded. Adrian froze. His drink nearly slipped from his hand. Because there she was, descending the staircase slowly, gracefully, in a deep emerald gown that shimmered under the chandelier light. Her posture flawless, her gaze steady, her presence impossible to ignore. The woman he left broken in a hospital bed now stood above him, untouchable, powerful, radiant. Vanessa, standing beside him, dropped her glass. The crystals shattered across the marble floor. Heads turned, whispers spread. Adrian looked like he had seen a ghost. "Elena?" he breathed. But she didn't react, didn't even acknowledge the shock on his face. She reached the stage, took the microphone. "Phoenix Capital is currently exploring partnerships," she said smoothly. Her voice calm, controlled, professional. Her eyes briefly landed on Adrian, just long enough to make his pulse spike. "We value transparency, clean reputations, and measurable growth." Every word was a blade hidden inside silk. Vanessa grabbed Adrian's arm. "We need to leave," she whispered sharply. But desperation had already taken hold. "No," Adrian muttered, his eyes locked onto Elena. "She still remembers me." That was his weakness. He still believed emotion was a weapon. He pushed through the crowd and approached her as the applause faded. "Elena?" She turned slowly, her face unreadable. "Yes?" He blinked. The single word hit harder than a scream. "It's me, Adrian." A pause. Then Elena slightly tilted her head, as if searching her memory. "Ah," she said softly. A cold, almost smile touched her lips. "Mr. Cross." The distance in those two words destroyed him. "I heard your company is facing liquidity issues." Adrian swallowed, hard. "It's temporary. A short-term DAP. With the right support, I can triple revenue in 1 quarter." Elena held his gaze, calm, measuring. Interesting. One word, no emotion, no history, only business. "Come to my office Monday morning. Bring your financials." Adrian's eyes widened. Hope returned instantly. Blind hope. "Thank you," he said quickly. "I knew you'd understand." Elena's expression remained perfectly still. "Understand what?" she asked. He froze. A beat. "Business," she said coolly. "Only business." Then she turned away, ending the conversation like he no longer existed. Monday arrived. Adrian sat at the far end of a polished conference table, surrounded by analysts, lawyers, silent observers. Elena entered last. Sharp charcoal suit, hair precise, eyes colder than glass. She sat, opened his file. The room remained silent for nearly 30 seconds, just enough to make him sweat. Then she looked up. "Your projections are aggressive." Adrian forced confidence. "I'm prepared to exceed them." Elena nodded once, then slid a contract across the table. "Phoenix Capital is prepared to invest $2 million. Adrian's breath caught. A miracle, exactly what he needed. But miracles always come with conditions. Convertible loan, 3-month maturity. Adrian kept nodding, too fast, too eager. Collateralized by all corporate shares. Still he nodded. And all personal assets tied to the company. His smile didn't fade, because desperation had made him blind. If targets are not met in 90 days, she let the silence stretch. Everything transfers to Phoenix Capital. Adrian didn't even hesitate. He signed. The pen moved across the page, smooth, final, irreversible. The moment the ink dried, Elena slowly leaned back, watched him, and for the first time, a faint smile touched her lips, because the noose had just tightened, and he tied it himself. The moment Adrian signed, his fate was sealed. He just didn't know it yet. The contract lay between them like a loaded weapon, elegant, simple, deadly. Adrian stood from his chair with visible relief. For the first time in months, hope returned to his face. A foolish kind of hope, the kind desperate men mistake for victory. "Thank you, Elena," he said. His voice softened, almost personal, but she didn't respond, didn't smile, didn't even blink. Marcus stepped forward and collected the signed contract, precise, careful, like evidence already being prepared. Once Adrian left the building, the conference room doors closed. The silence shifted. No more performance, only strategy. Marcus allowed himself the smallest grin. He just leveraged assets that legally aren't his anymore. Elena slowly folded her hands on the table. "Exactly," she said. The divorce decree had finalized months ago, and Adrian, in his arrogance, never realized several properties remained registered under Elena's name. The warehouse, the Midtown commercial lot, even the estate itself. By using them as collateral, he had just crossed the line from desperation into federal fraud. Marcus slid another folder across the table. "There's more." Elena opened it. Inside were surveillance photos, private bank transfers, phone logs, hotel footage, and one name repeated again and again: Vanessa Hale. Her expression didn't change, but her attention sharpened. "What am I looking at?" she asked. Marcus leaned forward. An insurance policy. Elena flipped through the pages. Vanessa entering luxury hotels, dinner reservations, private meetings. A man appearing in nearly every frame. Dark hair, tattoo on the neck, expensive taste, dangerous smile. "Who is he?" Elena asked. Trevor Kane, nightclub owner, prior fraud record, money laundering connections. Elena's fingers paused on the next page. Bank transfers, large ones, repeated. Funds moving from Adrian's company accounts, into Trevor's shell businesses. Her eyes narrowed slightly. So she's draining him too, Marcus nodded. For months. A pause. And there's one more thing. He slid the final document toward her. A medical report. Vanessa's pregnancy timeline. Elena read the dates once, then again. And then the truth landed. Sharp. Brutal. Beautiful. The math didn't fit. The estimated conception date overlapped exactly with the week Adrian had been overseas at an international trade summit. Public appearances, flight records, media coverage. Impossible to dispute. Elena looked up slowly. The baby, Marcus finished the sentence, is Trevor's. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Perfect. The final piece. Vanessa wasn't building a future with Adrian. She was bleeding him dry while preparing to disappear with another man's child. Elena closed the file carefully. Months ago, this revelation would have felt personal, painful, explosive. Now, it was leverage, a weapon waiting for the right moment. "When do we use it?" Marcus asked. Elena stood and walked toward the window. The skyline glowed beneath the night, cold and endless. "Not yet," she said quietly. Marcus watched her carefully. "You want him comfortable first." Elena nodded. "Desperate men make mistakes," she said. A pause. "But hopeful men," her reflection stared back at her from the glass, "make fatal ones." 3 weeks later, Adrian requested a private dinner to celebrate the partnership. Elena accepted. The restaurant was inside a restored historic mansion overlooking the city. Soft candlelight, white linen, a violinist in the corner, the perfect setting for manipulation. Adrian arrived early, nervous, trying to look charming again, trying to become the man she once trusted. But Elena saw through every movement, every rehearsed smile, every carefully chosen word. "You look incredible," Adrian said as she sat down. She simply unfolded her napkin. "Let's discuss business." He laughed softly, but his eyes said something else, something dangerous. "Elena, there's something I need to tell you." She remained silent. He leaned closer, lowered his voice. "My mother pressured me." The lie began, predictable, weak. "She controlled everything. I was trapped." Elena's face remained unreadable. "And Vanessa," he continued, shaking his head, "was a mistake." A pause. "I'm ending it." He studied her reaction, looking for softness, for weakness, for the old Elena, but she gave him nothing. "I never stopped thinking about you," he said. The violin continued playing in the background, a tragic soundtrack for a desperate man. "If I had another chance," Elena whispered, "I'd choose you." Elena slowly lifted her glass, took a measured sip, then set it down. Her purse rested beside her chair. Inside, a digital recorder captured every word, every lie, every betrayal. She leaned slightly closer, just enough to make him believe. "And your mother?" she asked softly. Adrian scoffed. "She belongs in a care facility." Another sentence, another nail. "And Vanessa?" he asked. A bitter smile crossed his face. "She's nothing but a burden." Perfect. The recorder kept running. Elena stood gracefully, reached for her coat. "I'll think about it," she said. Hope lit up Adrian's face instantly. "Really?" She looked down at him, calm, controlled, almost merciful. "Yes," she said. A pause. "Enjoy your dinner, Adrian." Her eyes held his for one final second. It may be the last peaceful one you ever have. Then she walked away, leaving him smiling, still believing he had a chance, still blind. And in her purse, the truth was already recorded, waiting. By Monday morning, the city skyline gleamed behind the floor-to-ceiling glass of Phoenix Capital's executive boardroom, sharp and silver beneath the spring sun. At the far end of the long mahogany table sat Ethan Vale. 3 months ago, he had been the untouchable king of his little empire. Today, he looked like a man drowning in a suit. His tie was crooked, his eyes were bloodshot. Sleep had clearly abandoned him weeks ago. Still, greed kept his spine straight. Because across from him sat the woman he once believed he had destroyed, Vivian Sterling. She wore a tailored emerald blazer over a silk ivory blouse, her dark hair cut into a sleek, elegant line that framed a face now sharpened by confidence. No trace remained of the frightened woman he had abandoned in a hospital ward. Her gaze was cool, controlled, dangerous. To Ethan, she looked less like a person and more like judgment itself. Beside her sat Thomas Reed, the Sterling Group's legal mastermind, flipping through Ethan's financial disclosures with surgical calm. The silence in the room stretched until it became painful. Then Vivian finally spoke. "Mr. Vale," she said, her tone smooth as glass, "your company's liquidity crisis is far worse than your proposal suggested." Ethan forced a smile. "A temporary setback. Our next quarter projections are strong." Thomas slid a stack of papers forward. "Interesting," he said, "because according to the banking records, your supposed vendor contracts don't exist." Ethan's fingers twitched. Vivian watched every movement. He was lying, and he thought he was good at it. She almost admired the confidence. Almost. One of the analysts on her team pushed a screen toward him. Rows of numbers glowed under the boardroom lights. Ghost invoices, inflated revenue, phantom clients. The evidence was devastating. Sweat gathered at Ethan's temple. But then Vivian leaned back in her chair, crossing one leg over the other, and smiled. The smile confused him. It should have terrified him. "Despite all of this," she said calmly, "Phoenix Capital is prepared to extend a $2 million convertible rescue loan." Ethan's head snapped up. For a second, he forgot to breathe. "$2 million?" he repeated. Thomas nodded. "Collateralized by full corporate shares, personal guarantees, and all listed real estate assets." A thick contract was placed in front of him. The pages might as well have been gold, because to Ethan, this wasn't debt, it was salvation. Vivian studied him with silent fascination. He still hadn't changed. Even now, standing inches from the cliff, he could only see the illusion of rescue, not the trap waiting beneath it. "This gives you 90 days, she said. "Meet the performance targets and the company stabilizes." "And if I do?" Ethan asked, almost breathless. Her lips curved. "Then Phoenix becomes a silent strategic partner." That was the bait. He swallowed it whole. "And if I miss?" Thomas answered this time. "Then ownership transfers fully to Phoenix Capital." The room went still. Any rational businessman would have hesitated. Any sane man would have called his attorney. Any careful man would have questioned why the targets looked just barely achievable. But Ethan was desperate, and desperate men mistake ropes for lifelines. He signed. The pen scratched across the page with a sound Vivian would later remember as one of the most satisfying sounds of her life. When the final signature dried, Ethan exhaled like a condemned man granted a pardon. "You won't regret this," he said. Vivian met his eyes. "Oh, I think one of us definitely will." He left the building 20 minutes later, shoulders straighter, hope restored, already planning how he would spin the story to Lila and his dying mother. But the second the boardroom doors closed behind him, Thomas let out a quiet laugh. He just leveraged assets the court already transferred into your name. Vivian rose slowly and walked toward the window overlooking Atlanta. Cars crawled below like tiny pieces on a chessboard. Her city, her battlefield. "And the sales targets?" Thomas asked. She stared at the horizon. "Impossible." He smiled. "Distribution channels?" "Already blocked. Marcus has been leaning on his biggest clients for weeks. By Friday, half his retailers will terminate." Thomas closed the folder. "Then the clock starts now." Vivian's reflection stared at her from the glass. No fear, no hesitation, only purpose. For 2 years, Ethan had built his life on manipulation. Now she had given him exactly what he always wanted, a deal too good to refuse, a noose made of gold, and he had tightened it around his own neck with a signature. Her phone buzzed. A new file had arrived from Marcus. Lila Vale, confidential. Vivian opened it. The first photograph loaded. Lila, stepping out of a downtown hotel. Not alone. A man followed behind her. Handsome, younger, dangerous looking. Vivian's eyes narrowed. Now that was interesting. Very interesting. She turned from the window, the faintest smile touching her lips. Looks like Ethan's betrayal isn't the only one in this marriage. And just like that, Phase 2 began. The confidential files stayed open on Vivian Sterling's desk long after everyone else had left the boardroom. Outside, Atlanta glittered beneath the night sky like spilled diamonds, but Vivian's full attention remained on the photographs spread before her. Each image told a story, and every story ended with Ethan Vale losing everything. The first photo showed Lila Vale stepping out of the Grand Crescent Hotel, her hand linked with a man Vivian had never seen before. Tall, broad shoulders, dark leather jacket. The kind of man who looked more comfortable in backroom deals than daylight. The second image was worse. Lila was laughing, leaning close as the man whispered something into her ear before guiding her into a black SUV. Intimate, familiar, practiced. This wasn't a mistake. This was routine. Marcus Whitaker stood across from the desk, hands clasped behind his back. "We dug deeper," he said. "The man's name is Damon Cross, owns 3 nightclubs downtown, 2 money laundering investigations, 1 dismissed assault charge, and multiple shell companies moving cash through Miami." Her lips curved slightly. "So while Ethan was begging for investors," she murmured, "his fiancée was draining him through her lover." Marcus nodded. "Hundreds of thousands over the last 6 months." Vivian leaned back slowly, letting the pieces settle into place. Perfect. Not only had Ethan betrayed her for greed, he had chosen a woman doing the exact same thing to him. Poetic. Her fingers tapped lightly against the desk. And the pregnancy timeline. Marcus handed over another report. Vivian scanned the dates once, then read them again. 21 weeks pregnant. Her eyes sharpened. The conception date landed precisely during the week Ethan had been in New York attending the textile summit. 7 full days. Nowhere near Atlanta. Nowhere near Lila. But Damon's location data placed him inside Lila's penthouse every single night that week. The corners of Vivian's mouth lifted into a cold smile. "The baby isn't his." Marcus gave a single approving nod. Not even remotely possible. Vivian closed the file. For a moment, silence filled the office. Then she stood. "Set up a dinner." Marcus raised a brow. "With Ethan?" "Yes." "At Sterling House?" Vivian shook her head. "No, somewhere intimate, candlelight, music, the kind of place that makes weak men believe in second chances." A slow understanding crossed Marcus's face. "You want him emotional. I want him honest." 2 nights later, Ethan arrived at the Hawthorne Estate, one of Atlanta's oldest private dining mansions. Crystal chandeliers glowed softly above polished silver. A violinist played in the corner. The entire room had been reserved for him. Vivian stood by the fireplace in a black silk gown, elegant and unreadable. For a brief second, Ethan looked stunned, because this version of Vivian was so far beyond the woman he had once discarded that his mind struggled to connect them. "Vivian," he said, forcing charm into his voice, "you look incredible." She offered a polite smile. "Sit, Ethan." Dinner was served in courses. Wine flowed, and slowly, exactly as she expected, Ethan began unraveling. At first, he talked business, then regret, then the lies started dressing themselves as confessions. "My mother controlled everything," he said, swirling the wine in his glass. "You have to understand that." Vivian said nothing. He took her silence as encouragement. "She pushed me into everything, the marriage, the divorce, Leela, all of it." The violinist's music softened. Perfect timing. Ethan leaned closer across the candlelit table. "I was weak, but I never stopped thinking about you." Vivian's expression didn't move. He mistook that for softness, too. "Leela was a mistake, a burden. I'm ready to end it tomorrow." He swallowed hard. "I'd even put my mother in a private care facility if that's what it took." Vivian lifted her wineglass, hiding the faint smile threatening to form. Every word, exactly as predicted. Inside her clutch purse, a tiny digital recorder captured each syllable, crystal clear. Then Ethan reached for her hand. This time, she let him touch it, just long enough. "Do you really think," he said softly, "that we could start over?" Vivian looked into his eyes. For the first time in years, she saw him clearly. Not powerful, not untouchable, just a coward drowning in desperation. She withdrew her hand. "I'll think about it." Hope flashed across his face so quickly it almost made her laugh. She rose gracefully from the table. "Enjoy the dessert, Ethan." He stood too. "When will I see you again?" Vivian slipped on her coat. "Soon," she said. Then her eyes hardened into ice. Very soon. She walked out, heels clicking softly across marble floors, the recorder safe inside her purse. Outside, Marcus waited beside the black Mercedes. "Well?" he asked as she entered the car. Vivian handed him the device. Everything. Marcus listened to the first few seconds. Ethan's voice spilled from the speaker. "Leela was a burden. I'd put my mother in a facility." Marcus gave a low whistle. "This will destroy him." Vivian stared out at the city lights rushing past the window. "No," she said quietly. "This will destroy them all." Her phone buzzed. A message from Thomas Reed. "Federal audit team ready. Loan maturity date locked from Monday morning." Vivian smiled. The golden noose was tightening, and Ethan had no idea the second betrayal waiting in the shadows belonged to the woman sleeping in his own bed. Monday arrived like judgment. Rain hammered the glass walls of Vail Textiles headquarters, turning the Atlanta skyline into a blur of gray steel and storm clouds. Inside the executive office, Ethan Vail stood at the window with a glass of whiskey in his hand, watching the city below. For the first time in months, he felt hope. Phoenix Capital's $2 million rescue loan had bought him breathing room, or so he believed. He had spent the entire weekend fabricating numbers, fake purchase orders, invented vendor contracts, projected sales reports inflated beyond reality. On paper, Vail Textiles looked stronger than ever. In the real world, the warehouse floors were nearly empty. Production lines sat silent. Retail partners had quietly terminated their agreements, and Ethan had no idea that every exit had already been sealed. At exactly 9 a.m., the boardroom doors opened. Vivian Sterling entered first. Behind her came Thomas Reed, 2 forensic accountants, Phoenix legal counsel, and 3 federal auditors. The air in the room changed instantly. Ethan forced a smile. "Vivian," he said, trying to sound confident, "I was just preparing the quarterly numbers." Thomas placed a thick black folder on the conference table. "We already have them." Ethan's throat tightened. Vivian took her seat at the head of the table, elegant in a white tailored suit, her expression unreadable. Mr. Vale, she said coolly, today marks the maturity review of your performance covenant. He nodded too quickly. Sales are up 200%. One of the accountants slid a tablet toward him. Warehouse drone footage. Rows of dark, idle machinery. No workers, no shipments, no inventory movement. Ethan's confidence flickered. That footage is outdated, he snapped. Another file opened. Banking records. No incoming receivables, no wholesale deposits, no supplier payments. Then Thomas laid down the final blow. Signed termination notices from Ethan's 5 largest retail distributors, all dated weeks earlier. His face drained of color. That's impossible. Vivian's eyes stayed fixed on him. No, she said softly, it's very possible when your reputation collapses. Ethan pushed back from the table. Panic had finally arrived. You set this up. Vivian tilted her head. No, Ethan, you set it up the day you signed impossible terms without reading the battlefield. Thomas opened the contract to the highlighted clause. By failure to meet agreed targets, all corporate shares and pledged collateral now transfer immediately to Phoenix Capital. The room fell silent. Everything, the company, the warehouses, the trademarks, the estate, gone. Transferred with the same kind of signature Ethan once used to destroy her. His knees nearly buckled, but before he could recover, one of the federal auditors stepped forward. There's another matter. Ethan turned slowly. The man opened a badge wallet. FBI Financial Crimes Division. The words hit harder than anything else. Thomas folded his hands. You pledged real estate assets already transferred by court decree into Vivian Sterling's ownership. The meaning landed like a hammer. The Savannah warehouse, the Midtown property, the Alpharetta mansion, all of it had been legally hers since the divorce. Ethan had just used someone else's property as collateral. Federal fraud, wire fraud, bank fraud, forgery. The charges stacked like falling bricks. His breathing turned ragged. Vivian rose from her chair. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan's voice cracked. Please. One word. Barely human. Vivian stared at him with cold stillness. This was the same man who once threw divorce papers onto her hospital bed while she bled from surgery. The same man who had reduced her sacrifice to a transaction. Now he was the one begging, and she felt nothing. You should have read the fine print, she said. The FBI agents moved closer. Ethan bolted. Pure instinct. He shoved past one of the accountants, sprinted through the side hallway, down the emergency staircase, and burst into the underground parking garage. Rainwater dripped from the ceiling pipes. His shoes slapped wildly against concrete as he reached his black Bentley. Hands trembling, he jammed the key into the engine. The engine roared alive. He sped out into the storm. His destination was obvious: St. Helena Medical Center. If everything was ending, he needed to see his mother, needed someone still loyal, needed one person left in his corner. By the time he reached the hospital, his hands were shaking so violently he almost dropped the keys. He rushed down the familiar corridor toward Beatrice Vale's private cardiac suite, but when he threw open the door, he froze. Lila. She stood beside the hospital bed, not crying, not comforting his mother. She was stuffing diamond watches, gold cufflinks, and bundles of cash into an expensive leather bag. Her mother, pale and weak beneath the machines, stared in confusion. "Lila," he whispered. She turned sharply, and for the first time there was no softness in her face, only irritation. "What are you doing?" he shouted. Her pulse spiked. "You can't leave now." She zipped the bag. "Watch me." He stepped closer. "What about the baby?" For one brief second, something cruel flashed in her smile. Then she said the words that shattered the last thing Ethan thought he still owned. "What baby?" The room went silent. Ethan stared. Lila stepped forward, voice sharp as broken glass. "Did you really think I was going to raise your mother's precious heir?" she sneered. "Damon and I were always leaving. We were just waiting for enough money." The name hit him like a bullet. Damon, the club owner, the transfers, the lies. Suddenly, the pieces collided in his mind. The late nights, the secretive calls, the disappearing funds, the timeline. His face twisted. "The child," Lila smiled, "was never yours." Behind them, the heart monitor beside Beatrice's bed began to beep faster, faster. Her frail hands gripped the blanket as realization tore through her. Her future legacy, her grandson, the entire bloodline she worshipped. A lie. And Ethan stood in the center of it, broken, soaked from rain, watching his world collapse from every direction at once. Then the hospital room door opened, and Vivian Sterling stepped inside, dressed in white, calm, untouchable. The storm had finally reached its center. The hospital room turned silent the moment Vivian Sterling stepped inside. Rainwater still dripped from Ethan Vale's coat onto the polished floor. Lila stood frozen beside the bed, her leather bag half-zipped, diamond watches and cash still visible inside. And on the hospital bed, Beatrice Vale lay pale against the pillows, the heart monitor beside her pulsing in frantic, uneven bursts. Vivian closed the door behind her with quiet precision. The soft click sounded louder than thunder. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Ethan turned toward her, his face twisted with panic and disbelief. "Vivian," he breathed. She said nothing. Her white suit was immaculate. Not a wrinkle, not a drop of rain. She looked less like a woman and more like fate arriving exactly on time. Lila recovered first. Her expression hardened. "So this is your doing," she snapped. Vivian's eyes moved to the leather bag in Lila's hand. "Running away with stolen property?" she asked calmly. "Predictable." Lila lifted her chin. "At least I'm smart enough not to drown with him." Ethan spun toward her. "You lied to me," he shouted, voice cracking. "The baby!" Lila cut him off with a bitter laugh. "The baby was never yours, Ethan. Damon and I planned to leave the second Phoenix released the loan funds." His knees weakened. Every betrayal he once inflicted was now being returned with brutal precision. Vivian watched it all with perfect stillness. No anger, no triumph, only cold observation. Then she stepped forward and dropped a thin black folder onto the foot of Beatrice's hospital bed. The papers slid open, photographs spilled out. Lila with Damon at the hotel, bank transfers, security stills, medical reports, DNA probability charts, every secret laid bare. Beatrice's trembling fingers clawed at the blanket as she stared at the evidence. Her eyes moved from the photos to Ethan, then to Lila, then back to Vivian. The woman she had once mocked, the woman she had called a charity case, now standing above all of them. Her breathing turned ragged. The monitor beeped faster. Ethan's voice broke into a desperate whisper. "Mom." Vivian finally spoke. Her tone was calm enough to be terrifying. "You wanted loyalty proven through sacrifice," she said, looking directly at Beatrice. "I gave that loyalty freely. I would have given everything to save a real mother." Beatrice reached a shaking hand toward her. "Please," she whispered. The word daughter hovered in the old woman's eyes, too late to become sound. Vivian stared at that outstretched hand, the same hand that had once dismissed her pain, the same hand that had signed off on her destruction. Her expression never changed. "My kidney was a gift of love, and love is something this family never understood." The room's tension snapped when Ethan lunged toward Lila. "You ruined everything!" His hand struck her face so hard she crashed against the side cabinet, sending a vase of flowers shattering across the floor. Lila screamed. "You were already ruined. You're weak, Ethan. Damon saw it from the beginning." Before Ethan could move again, Vivian raised her phone and tapped the screen. The hidden recording from their candlelit dinner began to play. Ethan's own voice filled the hospital room. "Lila was a mistake. I'll put my mother in a facility. She's become a burden." The words sliced through the room sharper than any blade. Beatrice's face crumpled. The son she had worshipped, the empire she had built around him, the future she had demanded at the cost of Vivian's body. All of it had been meaningless. The monitor screamed, a long, sharp, rising alarm. Doctors and nurses rushed toward the door, but Vivian didn't move. She simply watched. Ethan turned toward the bed, horror flooding his face. "Mom!" Beatrice's eyes found Vivian one final time. Regret, fear, understanding. Then the line on the screen flattened into one long, endless tone. The room exploded into motion. Medical staff pushed past them. Lila backed toward the wall in panic. Ethan dropped to his knees beside the bed, sobbing so hard he could barely breathe. Vivian stood still in the middle of the chaos, a woman carved from ice and fire. No tears came, no mercy remained. She had already mourned the innocents long ago. This was only consequence. 2 FBI agents appeared in the doorway seconds later, badges raised. "Ethan Vale, you are under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, and financial conspiracy." Ethan turned slowly, broken beyond recognition. He looked up at Vivian as the agents pulled him to his feet. For the first time, he truly understood. He had not destroyed her, he had created her. The cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. Lila tried to slip toward the hallway, but another pair of agents intercepted her. Lila Cross attempted interstate financial evasion and conspiracy. Her face drained of color. The leather bag slipped from her fingers. Cash spilled across the polished hospital floor like confetti at the funeral of their empire. As Ethan was dragged from the room, he looked back one last time. Vivian stood framed by the storm-dark window, Atlanta's skyline glowing behind her, untouchable, unbroken, victorious. And yet her face held no joy, only peace. The peace of a debt finally paid, the peace of a scar that no longer hurt. She turned and walked out of the hospital room without once looking back at the chaos collapsing behind her. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. But for Vivian, the storm was finally over.
1 year later, the world looked different. Or maybe Vivian Sterling did. Morning sunlight poured across the marble terrace of the Sterling Foundation headquarters, warming the city below in soft gold. Atlanta stretched to the horizon, alive with movement, ambition, and second chances. Vivian stood at the balcony rail in a cream silk blouse and tailored charcoal trousers, a tablet in one hand and a cup of black coffee in the other. The scar along her left side had faded into a pale silver line. Once, it had symbolized betrayal. Now it reminded her of survival, a medal she carried beneath perfect fabric and stronger skin. Behind her, the boardroom buzzed with low conversation. Lawyers, advisors, and foundation directors were gathering for the quarterly philanthropy review. Hospitals, scholarship programs, emergency legal funds for women trapped in abusive financial marriages. Every project on the agenda carried a piece of her past, pain repurposed into purpose. Marcus Whitaker approached with his usual calm efficiency, handing her a folder. "Today's reports," he said. 3 new transplant grants approved, 2 legal defense funds activated overnight. Vivian skimmed the papers. One case involved a young woman in Savannah whose husband had secretly taken loans in her name. Another was a foster care graduate fighting for housing rights after aging out of the system. The stories hit close to the bones of who she used to be. "Approve double coverage," she said without hesitation, and assign Thomas's team to the Savannah case personally. Marcus gave a small smile. You never miss the ones who remind you of yourself. Vivian closed the folder. Because no one should have to survive alone. Her voice carried the certainty of someone who had once known exactly what abandonment felt like. That afternoon, she drove alone beyond the city. The road curved through quiet Georgia hills, lined with pines and fading autumn leaves. By sunset, she stood before two modest granite headstones in a peaceful cemetery outside Monroe County. Her parents. Fresh, white lilies rested in her arms. For a long moment, she simply looked at the names carved into stone, the names that had once been all she had left. Then she knelt and placed the flowers carefully at the base of the graves. Things changed, she whispered. The breeze moved softly through the trees. She told them everything. How the woman they lost on Interstate 75 had become someone stronger than fear. How she now sat on hospital boards. How families who couldn't afford surgery now received grants in their names. How foster children aging out of the system now had scholarships waiting for them. Every word felt like closing an old wound with gentle hands. The sky deepened into amber and rose. Behind her, footsteps approached on the gravel path. A familiar voice spoke. Am I interrupting? Vivian turned. Dr. Daniel Bennett stood there holding two paper cups of coffee. Jeans, flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up. No white coat, no hospital walls. Just the man who had once walked into a room at the exact moment her life split in two and chose to stand on the right side of it. A warm smile touched her lips. You remembered. He lifted the cups. One black, no sugar. Some things matter. He sat beside her on the stone bench facing the graves, handing her the coffee. For a while they said nothing. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was easy, safe. Daniel glanced at her. Harrison says you're about to take over the expansion project in Charlotte. She nodded. The children's hospital wing. He smiled. That's going to save a lot of lives. Vivian looked toward the fading sunset. For a long time, I thought survival was enough, she said quietly. Now I want what comes after survival. Daniel studied her for a moment. And what's that? She turned to him. Peace. The word lingered in the cool evening air. He hesitated, then asked softly, Do you ever regret any of it? Vivian thought about Ethan, the betrayal, the hospital room, the courtroom decrees, the sound of handcuffs closing, the woman she had become through fire. Then she looked back at the graves. No, she said, I regret the girl who believed love had to be earned through suffering, but I don't regret what she survived. Daniel's expression softened. That girl became extraordinary. For the first time in a long while, Vivian let herself fully feel the truth of that. Not revenge, not wealth, not victory. Healing. Daniel stood and offered her his hand. There's a little barbecue place downtown, he said. No white tablecloths, no crystal chandeliers, just good food and terrible country music. A real laugh escaped her. Warm, unforced. The kind she hadn't heard from herself in years. That sounds perfect. She placed her hand in his. His grip was steady. No manipulation, no hidden agenda, only sincerity. Together they walked down the gravel path as the last light of day spilled gold across the hills. Behind them, the flowers rested peacefully beneath the stone. Ahead of them, the road curved toward a city full of unfinished possibilities. The sun was setting, but Vivian no longer feared darkness, because now she knew with certainty, morning always comes.
6 months after that evening in the cemetery, Atlanta stood beneath the glow of a winter sunrise, the skyline painted in pale gold and silver.
On the top floor of the new Sterling Children's Medical Tower, sunlight spilled through massive glass walls and danced across polished marble floors. Today was opening day. Doctors, surgeons, donors, city officials, and journalists filled the grand atrium below, their voices blending into a hum of anticipation. At the center of it all stood Vivian Sterling. She wore a pearl-white tailored suit, elegant and powerful, yet there was something softer in her expression now. Peace had changed her more beautifully than revenge ever could. A silver plaque covered by velvet waited beside the entrance. Engraved beneath it, hidden for now, were the names of the people this building would honor forever. Her parents, and every forgotten child who had once stood where she stood, alone, unseen, and afraid. Marcus Whitaker approached with his usual composed stride. "The press is ready, and Harrison wants to know if you're prepared for the speech." Vivian smiled faintly. "I've been preparing for this speech my whole life." Across the atrium, Harrison Sterling sat in a wheelchair near the front row, older now, wrapped in a dark wool blanket, but still carrying the unmistakable force of a man who had built cities from concrete and willpower. When their eyes met, he gave her a slow, proud nod, not as a mentor, as family, as the man who had taken the broken pieces of her life and taught her how to forge them into armor. The ceremony began. Cameras flashed. The room gradually fell silent as Vivian stepped to the podium. For a moment, she simply looked out at the sea of faces. Doctors in white coats, young foster children invited from local group homes, families whose surgeries had been funded by the foundation, people who represented both the pain of her past and the purpose of her future. Then she began. "When I was 9 years old," she said, her voice steady and clear, "I lost everything on a highway outside this city." The room held its breath. "I spent years believing survival was the highest form of victory. I thought making it through the darkness was enough." Her fingers brushed lightly against the scar hidden beneath her suit jacket. "But survival is only the beginning." The silence deepened. "This tower exists because every child deserves more than survival. Every patient deserves dignity. Every woman deserves protection from those who mistake love for ownership." A murmur of emotion rippled through the crowd. She saw tears in the eyes of one of the transplant recipients sitting in the front row. A young foster girl, no older than 10, stared at her like she was seeing proof that another life was possible. Vivian's chest tightened. This was the real ending. Not Ethan's downfall, not the arrests, not the empire she inherited. This moment, the ability to stand in light and turn suffering into shelter for others. She stepped away from the podium and reached for the velvet cord. "With gratitude to those who gave me life," she said softly, "and to those who taught me how to rebuild it." The curtain dropped. The plaque gleamed. The Elias and Maria Sterling Children's Tower. Applause thundered through the atrium, but Vivian barely heard it, because in the front row, Harrison's eyes had filled with tears, and beside him stood Dr. Daniel Bennett, no longer just the man who saved her in a hospital corridor, now the man who had quietly become part of every ordinary day that followed. The dinners, the late-night board meetings, the shared laughter over terrible barbecue, the silent visits to the cemetery. He stepped closer as the crowd moved around them. "You did it," he said softly. Vivian looked up at the shining letters above the entrance. "No," she said, smiling through tears. "We did." Daniel hesitated for only 1 second before reaching into his coat pocket, a small velvet box. The world around them seemed to blur. Marcus stopped mid-conversation. Thomas Reed froze near the press line.
Even Harrison leaned forward in his chair, smiling like he had known this moment was coming. Daniel opened the box. Inside rested a simple platinum ring, elegant, timeless, no excessive diamonds, no performance, only truth. "Vivian," he said, voice low and warm, "your life has been built on surviving storms. I don't want to be another storm." Her breath caught. "I want to be the place you come home to after them." Tears finally slipped free, not from pain, not from loss, from the overwhelming, unfamiliar beauty of something real. He held out the ring. "Will you let the rest of your story be written with love instead of revenge?" The question settled over every scar she carried. For years, she had fought to prove she could survive alone. Now, she finally understood that strength and softness could exist in the same heart. She smiled, the kind of smile that belonged to the frightened girl she once was, the woman she had become, and the future waiting ahead. "Yes," she whispered, then stronger, "yes." Applause erupted again, louder this time, mixed with laughter and tears. Daniel slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had always been meant for her hand, as if all the broken roads of her life had been leading here. Vivian looked out through the towering glass windows. The sun had fully risen over Atlanta now, spilling light over the city she once thought had taken everything from her. Now it gave something back, a future, a family, a life no one could ever steal again. She rested her hand over Daniel's and looked towards the horizon. For the first time, the story no longer felt like an ending. It felt like a beginning. Because no matter how long the night, morning always comes.